Finally, I'm going to be talking about the Virtual Boy, Nintendo's biggest failure and a system that changed how I look at video game collecting as a whole. I up until very recently owned a complete in-box Virtual Boy. It was all nice and shiny, practically new. I had all but one of the US released titles in my collection, but then one day I woke up and I said, what the fuck am I doing with my life? Why do I own something I don't use or really care about? I double checked my videos, but even having owned the thing for so long, I never made a video about the Virtual Boy. It changed my outlook essentially. Why clutter myself with crap I don't use? To have it sitting on a shelf and stare at it? Or just to say, hey, I have one? I mean, what's the point? I never shared that I had one with anybody. I was never like, hey, look at what I got. It was a poor selling console for a reason. But was it all bad? Being a portable 32-bit console, it may have sounded kinda cool back in the day, but it had a lot of problems. It was really difficult to advertise the system to show what it was capable of doing. People were getting headaches playing it for more than like 30 seconds. It was also a bit pricey back then, costing around 180 bucks when it released in 1995 in the US. So many things could be attributed to its failure. It was quietly discontinued about a year later. Maybe it was just such a huge embarrassment for Nintendo, they didn't want to talk about it. They just want to act like it never happened. One thing I did find interesting though is Europe was spared this monstrosity. It never released in Europe, only in North America and Japan. Lucky for them, I guess. It was a commercial failure, only selling about 750,000 units worldwide. Maybe not the biggest console failure. I mean, there are plenty that fared way worse than the Virtual Boy, like the Hyperscan, as an example. But we'll talk about that turd in the very near future. So today, I want to quickly review every Virtual Boy game that released in the US. And there isn't many of them. Only 14 total were released here. A handful more was released in Japan, but I just want to focus on the games I owned and played on the original hardware. Is there anything worth playing? Did I not give it a fair chance? So let's get into it. No particular order, but I will put them in order at the end from worst to best, just to give you guys an idea how I rank the library. So first up, 3D Tetris. This was the final release game and maybe even one of the better ones for the system. It's easy to want to shit on every game released for the console, but this one is really not too bad. Instead of traditional Tetris on a 2D plane, you're working in layers with wireframe pieces that you can move around all different directions. Each layer is shown on the side of the screen, helping understand where the holes are that you need to fill, right? The game was surprisingly fun with its take on the original, though not perfect. The main problem I had with this game is you have no control over the camera. It's just constantly moving, sometimes forcing you to pay more attention to the little 2D layouts on the side instead of the actual play area. But yeah, this one's not bad. Not bad. Next up, Panic Bomber. So not your typical Bomberman game, but it is a Bomberman game. It's a puzzle game though. Match 3 shapes to clear them, get unlit bombs on your play area, and blow them up with lit bombs. One of those puzzle games where you play against the CPU to progress while if you're doing well, you toss junk to their side. Nothing amazing, nothing great, fairly average. This could have been on practically any system. You know, didn't really shine being on Virtual Boy. Next up, Galactic Pinball. This is a very floaty pinball game. 4 tables, average gameplay. Not too bad looking play fields, but nothing really there to leave a lasting impression. It appears like playing this game feels like what pinball on an air hockey table would feel like. Has anyone ever made an air hockey pinball game? It's kind of an interesting idea. I don't know if that exists, but that kind of seems like it might be kind of cool. But, you know, this game, it just really isn't much to write home about. I've played worse, but also played better during this time period when the game was released. Moving forward, golf. I like golf games, but not this one. That's pretty much my review. It's boring, a little hard to play. Nah. Next, Jack Bros. Now, this is a shining example of an excellent game that it kind of sucks that it's lost to this console. The idea of progressing downward while seeing the next level below you works well with the 3D effect of the game. Not crazy in your face, but it did look neat on the original hardware. It's one of the more rare and most expensive titles for the console. It's a fun one worth playing, but Rather short game, only a handful of levels, can blast through it pretty quickly. Next up, Mario Clash. So this is a take on the original Mario Bros. Arcade game, Mario Brothers, whatever. People always get on my ass when I say bros. Leave me alone. Now, it seems like this game's rather simple upon first look, and it is for the most part, but learning how to approach the different enemies to clear the stages can be a little fun, a little challenging. You know, it's kind of like most of the other games on the Virtual Boy. The 3D effect is just okay, but really it's just used to give depth for, you know, the background and foreground that you play on. That's about it. Nothing crazy. It's an okay game. Now, Mario Tennis. I hate this game. And I like Mario Tennis games, so I just don't like this one. Every time I play it, I have to relearn how to hit the ball. Perspective's a little difficult seeing where the ball is landing if you're not playing this, you know, via 3D on the original hardware, but that's not really the issue for me. No matter how I played this game in the past, I always felt like where I should start my swing to hit the ball just doesn't work. Not the way I think it should work anyway. It's like you have to go into this one realizing if the ball is in your face, your character's face, not your face, but the character's face, that's when you swing. You gotta have balls in your face before you swing. It just doesn't make sense to me. I just don't really care for it. It's rather basic. I believe this title was shipped with like every Virtual Boy. Yeah, whatever. Next up, another boring sports title. Nestor's Bowling. Or is it Nestor's Funky Bowling? Whatever it is. Nestor's Bowling. It is boring. Not a lot going for it. Very average graphics. Nothing special going on here. It's just bowling. I could play better bowling on the Game Boy, you know? Whatever. Red Alarm is the next one. 3D wireframe graphics all the way through on this one. I remember being impressed by how relatively smooth this game played on original hardware. It's decently fun, but also a little annoying is with the limitations of the graphics, the red wireframes, everything else being black. It's sometimes difficult to judge what is and isn't an opening to go through. Playing it on the original hardware is a little easier to judge with the 3D perspective, but quite a bit more annoying playing via emulation, but I guess you can get used to it. If the system was capable of a few more shades of color, like this could have been an awesome classic. Like the game's decent. It was a good game for its time, but just held back due to the system it was on. I mean, this could have been like a really awesome take on Star Fox for the Virtual Boy. But next up, Telero Boxer. This game isn't horrible, but it's not great either. Playing this just makes me wish there was a new Punch-Out game for the Nintendo Switch. I mean, I love the other Punch-Out games that have come out, but you know, with the Virtual Boy's wonky controller, the game played okay. You had different buttons for blocking and punching, and then using the D-pads, yes, D-pads to aim. But it just makes me appreciate the simplicity of the Punch-Out games, you know, controls even more than what you got going on here. I mean, it's not crazy, but it just, I don't know, it just doesn't feel as good as playing Punch-Out. Vertical Force next on the list. It's a vertical shoot 'em up. 2 planes of action. On original hardware, the simple 3D effect of 2 planes works well with this game. On emulation, it makes it a little more difficult to decipher where you are at. I mean, not really where you are at, but where the enemies and objects are. Typically, the smaller stuff is below you. I mean, that much is pretty obvious, but it could still be a little odd playing the game. Not how it was meant to be played, but you get used to it. It's still a fairly enjoyable game no matter how you play it. I think it's one of the few games that having the red and black color palette works fine, in my opinion. You got mid-level and end-level bosses for each stage, plenty of weapons and power-ups to collect. This is one of my favorites on the system. It's a decent game. Okay, finally, now we're getting to Wario Land. So a lot of games on the Virtual Boy don't really have the feel of like a full-on polished title, but this one's a definite must-play in my opinion. The 3D gimmick is just going between the 2 planes, background and foreground, to get around obstacles, find secrets, get items that you need to progress, that kind of thing. I mean, it could have worked on any system. I really wouldn't mind seeing this game get a remake, maybe with a few more colors. It's fun, definite top 3 on the system for me. Next, Virtual League Baseball. Boring, average Virtual League Baseball. No real use of the 3D effect to enhance the game. Batting sucks. pick mid, high, or low and time it correctly to hit the ball. You can move left and right as the batter. Can't move up and down. You know, playing the field, it feels like any other baseball game that came out in like the 80s or early 90s. I think for when this game released, it was behind the times, could have been so much more. But instead, I think it was a game that was released just having people like being like, oh, a 3D baseball game, this could be cool. You know, it's average at best with the 3D perspective while pitching and batting, if that's what you're into. Not a great game. Not a horrible one either, but there was so much better at the time. Now the final game on the list. This has to probably be the most garbage game on the system, and it's the one title that out of everything we just talked about, I didn't own. And I'm kind of glad I didn't, because all the games I bought, I didn't overspend for them. And this one's one that still goes for quite a bit of money. Always crazy. The suckiest games fetch the most money. It's crazy. Maybe this is one of the most garbage games ever created as well, but for the Virtual Boy, it is the worst game. I don't care who says what. It's the worst. This game is wonky. Waterworld. Shoot the dudes on jet skis. Save the drowning people. At least I think they're drowning. I don't know. I never watched the movie Waterworld, so no real idea how close this game replicates the movie's story and action. But if it's accurate to it, I guess the movie sucked too then. You control like your little boat thingy, which kind of sucks with how it moves. The game's just extremely simple and boring. It's a world of black water with red outlines. I mean, it could have been more fleshed out, ditched the Waterworld license, and gave it a Pirates of Dark Water license instead. That could have been kind of cool. That could have worked, right? I don't know. So overall, is the Virtual Boy worth buying and collecting for? In my opinion, no, unless you just love the history of Nintendo, which I do. But I could, you know, relive these titles via emulation for free, so I don't need to have this hardware or these overpriced cartridges in my collection. Very high maintenance system as well. I mean, could just die on you. The lenses could get jacked up. You got to get it serviced, that kind of thing. It's not worth it to me. If it is to you, that's fine. But yeah, you can emulate these games all over the place, all over your face pretty easily and get a feel for what you missed out on. There's a handful of titles that I think are decent, but nothing really that is extremely memorable. So there you go. Really do appreciate every single one of you guys. And we'll catch you on the next one. Bye.